Hi, I'm Dan.
And I'm James.
And welcome to the Cornwall Property Podcast, where every week we bring you the latest news, hot topics and guidance around the Cornwall property market.
Stay tuned to be informed, inspired and to have any of your property related questions answered by trusted local property professionals.
Welcome back to the Cornwall Property Podcast.
Welcome. Here we are again.
So we have been overwhelmed by the number of people who got in touch and said some lovely, lovely things about the first episode. So thank you very, very much for the support so early on. It means a lot, and it definitely helps. Definitely helps. So we recorded our first episode last week, and this is obviously our second episode. So as we mentioned last week, we'll explain how this is going to work, but we just want to get across that. Thank you very, very much. And we wouldn't be able to do this podcast without the questions coming in bits and bobs. So really, really chuffed, really, really happy with the amount of positive feedback we've had, and just massive, massive thank you for that. And obviously, just to remind you, the reason we're doing this podcast is we have a big crisis here in Cornwall, the housing crisis. There are a lot of empty properties in Cornwall currently, and a lot of people needing homes, so we need to try and bring these empty properties back to the market. So James, what we've got in store this week?
I too would just like to say a big thank you for all the questions that we've had in. We've got a good bank of questions now, and really, really good, interesting ones as well, for that matter. So as Dan said, this is the part of the episode where you guys can reach out to us, and we give our advice and tips, and put it out there to the masses. And just remember, you too can get your question in by going to cornwallpropertypodcast.com, scroll to the very bottom of the front page there, and you can put in your questions that way. So this week we are lucky enough to have Sarah from Bodmin, who has asked us our first very own question on this podcast.
Whoop, whoop.
It was this: how can I get started in investing in property? What a great question.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure that's the main question a lot of people are probably thinking of, hopefully, after that first podcast we released last week. So, Sarah, thank you very much for taking the time to get in touch as well. So, in essence, for me, for us, for James and I, we definitely feel that it's a case of getting yourself involved and surrounded with the people doing what you want to be doing. That is key. If you want to be a plumber, you're not going to go spend a load of time with carpenters. You want to spend time with plumbers, for example. So you need to spend time with people doing what you want to be doing, networking, getting in touch with people. So what we are involved, and where we actually met, the bromance, the partnership, all began on that nice wintry day. It was at the Alverton Hotel in Truro, and we both attend a property networking event. It's called the Professional Investment Group, known as PIG Cornwall. I actually host the event, but yeah, go to those types of events. There's other events available, but we go to that event. There's a lot of like-minded people, property enthusiasts, investors, newbies, experienced people. Everybody is welcome, but the key is surrounding yourself there with people doing what you want to be doing, and ultimately you need to be finding yourself what we called a power team. I think I touched on it last week, but simply a power team is so important for you. So what is a power team? A power team is simply people that you need to be able to count on to help you move forward with your investing journey. So you've got to think about who you're going to need to call upon to get involved with property. You're going to need money, so you're going to need a broker, mortgage broker, okay, or investors if you've got some money yourself, or people with money. But again, we can touch on that at a later podcast. You need to get a solicitor, obviously legalities, conveyancing side of things, so get a good solicitor, and estate agents. You're not going to find these deals if you're not in there with the estate agents. So again, these are the types of power teams, and depending on how big the projects are that you want to be looking at. Obviously, I gave an example last week of a commercial property that you could potentially go for, which is derelict, that we could bring back to the market. Well, that's going to be a lot more due diligence needed, such as a planning consultant, maybe surveyors. Obviously, builders are going to be a big one as well. So the key for me, Sarah, is to get yourself surrounded with people doing what you want to be doing. Feed off them, get as much information and knowledge from them, and then get that power team in place. Anything you want to add, James?
I would say, yeah, just keep a lot of motivation going. I think you've really got to have a core interest in property at your core, because, we're only kind of successful in things that we, truly believe in, and it's where our values are set up. I mean, for yourself, Dan, and I, we're doing this podcast because we want to, solve a problem in Cornwall, because it's not good with those figures that we've previously talked about. So believe in yourself that you can do it, and have that passion, I think, is really, really key to drive you to get into property investing.
Definitely. And that's another thing that the networking can bring, is the inspiration that can come, because you're with people that are doing this day in, day out. There's always speakers that come to these events that help you. For example, at PIG, we have mortgage brokers and things like that that can help give advice and feedback. So again, always get professional advice before making any type of investment. But the key is getting that advice from the right places. So again, that power team. So hopefully that helps, Sarah. Any other questions, obviously, please do get back in touch. But going to move on to the second question. And the second question we've got is from Rob in Truro. And again, thank you very, very much, Rob, for getting in touch. And Rob's question, I'm going to throw it at you, James. Why do you invest in property and not other areas?
Well, thank you for that, Rob. That's a really good question. Now, I don't want to be too biased because I'm a property investor myself, but property, let's kind of, look at it this way. Property is a good investment in my view because there's always going to be demand there. If you look at the restaurant industry, it's been going for many, many decades, and that is because we are humans, we need to eat. So the restaurant industry is always going to be there. We have different types of taste buds. Some people like Chinese, some people like Indian, some people like their traditional roast dinner, which is like where we met Dan at the pig group with our roast dinner, Christmas dinner in fact. But property, people are always going to need somewhere to live. If you're lucky enough to have a home, it's going to be there in all sorts of shapes and sizes, whether it's a one-bed flat or whether it's a mansion on Bodmin Moor. It's going to be there and it's going to be in demand. So as with all investments, property has risks for sure. But if we also look back at the history of house prices, they tend to go up every single year for a certain period of time. We'll come on to this, later on in other episodes, but you have what's called the property cycle, and that generally lasts for about 18 years, and you can have dips. If we look back to, 2008, 2009, we had a recession there, and the property took, a bit of a dive, but it was also quite a good time to buy property because you were buying it at the lower end of the market, a bit like Bitcoin, years ago, it was a lot cheaper. But then as long as you hold on to these properties, it comes out of that cycle and comes up the other side, and then property prices start to increase. So, looking back at the history of it, that's why I invest in property, because I know that, generally it goes one way, which is north. But for me, I really like the idea of taking these unencumbered, derelict properties that need the love and care, because the satisfaction that I get once these properties are brought back to life and you see a really happy family living in there, you're like, satisfaction there. I've created that. It's a bit like when you see these renovation antique programs, an old bike, and then they restore it back to its old glory, and they see a little child riding it. It has a lot of satisfaction there. So I think for a long-term investment is the way you need to be looking at this. You're not going to get rich, quick in property, and that is not what this podcast is about, and it's not what every investor does, is get rich quick. The good thing about property also, I think, is that there are so many different strategies out there, which we'll come onto in other podcasts, but you can do buy to lets, you can do rent to rent, you can do property flips. There's all types of things that you can do. But in answer to your question, Rob, it's a good investment because you definitely can make money. It's not without its risks, but generally it's going to be a good investment for the future over the long-term game.
Definitely. I think the key there for takeaway for anyone is it's a long-term game. You're not going to essentially... I know there's a strategy, again, I won't go into too much now about this flipping, but obviously with the flipping side of things, which is when you buy a property, you add some value and then you try and sell it for a profit over a short period of time, the risk you've got is timing the market right. If there's a dip in the market in terms of prices, if the market slows, or you're left with that property for quite some time. So that's when it could get sort of risky. But if you're in property for the long term, it's difficult to lose out unless you buy very poorly. So again, this is so important. Always seek professional advice before making any form of investment. Always do your research, get your power team in place. But there are definitely opportunities. And for us, obviously, we wouldn't be doing this podcast if we didn't believe in property. But there are opportunities out there, as we're trying to show you in our other podcasts as well. So, guys, thank you so much. James, great answer as well, mate. And thank you so much again for getting in touch. So many of you, and the lovely words that you've sent over, and we love to hear that. So please do send us your feedback, your reviews, your comments. They do get taken on board and are appreciated. So thank you very, very much. Now, if you have a question that you want to chuck towards James and I, then please, you can do exactly the same as Sarah and Rob. Get in touch via the Cornwall Property Podcast website. That's www.cornwallpropertypodcast.com. Scroll to one page, chuck your question at us, and we will see if we can get that answered in the next few episodes.
Big thank you as well to all the wonderful people out there that have already made contact with their questions. Really appreciate your support so early on in this podcast. It's really exciting and it's so good to be here. And we really hope we can help solve this problem. Can't wait.
Definitely. Guys, have a good week.
Bye-bye now.
Take care.